Hey, hello. Welcome to Social Thread Podcast. I'm Robert Payne.
And I'm Rob Reinders.
Awesome. And today we're going to jump into the very first pillar of Social Thread. And that is that as a part of Social Thread, we are wanting to explore our faith on our own terms. And the very first aspect of that is to love God. And I think, kind of a universal question is, who or what is God?
Yeah, well, that's easy softball.
yeah.
We have
quick answer, then we're on.
Yeah, congratulations. We have it all figured out. Yeah. So I think how we've broken it down is our simplest understanding could be when we say God, that it's something bigger than ourselves, or a lot of people refer to God as a higher power. And that's pretty broad. That can mean a lot of things. And from all the way to being a spiritual being that actually interjects itself into our lives and into the world to make changes, to influence us and events that happen, all the way over to maybe you understand God as just this force, this empowerment, this presence that empowers us and comforts and guides us. And finally, some may just reduce it down or understand God simply as, or that higher power as, something in moral or ethical terms, as a framework, as rules or principles, or a philosophy that's really worthy to center and build our lives around and live our lives by. So for some, connecting with God simply means that this feeling of being comforted or empowered, and they might do that through experiencing nature or exercising or even just having a great conversation with a friend. So there's that whole range and spectrum of how I think people have understood God, and that's maybe just scratching the surface, barely.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Christian tradition, of which you and I both practice, we understand God through a lens of Jesus, of the life, the ministry, the teachings of Jesus. So if Jesus's teachings and actions are about love, are about forgiveness, are about compassion, then we understand God to be about love, forgiveness, and compassion, and so forth. But even those that are part of the same faith tradition, even though we may say that's how we understand Jesus, therefore that's how we understand God. Again, even within our own practice, our own communities of faith, we're all going to have different understandings, from slightly different understandings to really broad different understandings. So I thought it'd be interesting if you and I, maybe just as examples, shared like what are our own personal understanding that those have changed over time. So I'll put it to you first.
Sure.
Yeah. So Robert, what's your, like, I guess, current image or understanding of God? And how did you get to that place? How has it changed over time?
Yeah, I think that I used to have a view of God that would be sort of like a all dominion type view, where it's every single thing had to it was a very black and white view of God, an entity in the sky and in the heavens, and it was I think it was a location based version of God. And now I view God almost like as a great movement. And even if those words are capitalized, like capital G, capital M, it's this great movement of what Jesus was teaching. And so that great movement of those words of Jesus is so powerful and so resonates today that that when you're looking in your filter of the world, I'm looking to see where those words are being manifested. So, I'm looking for where love is. I'm looking for compassion is, for where justice is, and then that's where God is moving. And so I feel drawn to get closer to where that's happening. And so for me, that's why I view it as a great movement. It's the words of God are so powerful that it compels me to move forward and me to help others move forward towards that movement. So to me, that's how I view God. It's a drawing and a pushing at the same time.
Wow, that's excellent. I think I'm gonna steal that. So so thanks everybody for listening to the podcast
Okay,
today.
next time
Yeah,
on the podcast.
next time.
So, but Rob, how has your view changed over time?
Yeah,
And what's your view of God now?
sure. I think it's kind of similar as a kid, and maybe even as a teenager and into early adulthood. I had that more location based understanding of God. Like there's a being that lives somewhere, that exists, that created me, that is interacting often in the world, that may be guiding my life or doing things to influence my life, and that it's mostly there for my good. But if I do bad things, then maybe bad things will happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
That being will punish me in some kind of way, and not necessarily punishment's a hard term, not necessarily in a I'm going to get cast into the pits of hell or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
sort of it'll dish back what I put into the world. And so but as time went on and I experienced more of the world and had more life experiences and saw more of the world and interacted with different communities and people from different backgrounds and heard different stories, my own understanding of God changed, and including when, as you get older and you start losing people you care about for various reasons, which is just something that happens in life. And man, that's when a friend of yours passes away, that will really challenge your understanding of God and what God's role was in that. So I think I've really come to understand God as a presence, as an influence that is all loving, and is pulling us in, or at least luring us, maybe persuading us into a better future. And again, I use that lens of Jesus, as if Jesus is calling us to be loving, caring, compassionate, forgiving, then I try to follow those nudges, those pulls. And if I'm seeing suffering, or if something bad is happening, it's not, why is God doing this to me, but more like, how is God calling me to be a compassionate, healing presence in this time? So yeah, and again, that changes from time to time, but overall I think that's at the core of what I understand God to be.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
yeah, so another question for you is, what do you think our image of God says about how we live our lives and how we see the world?
Well, I think that is, I think that's a question for I think that's a question that, I think is often just like super glossed over. It's like, okay, because you used to, when I went to college, I went to college in a really conservative environment, and they would call that question what you just said, your Christian worldview.
Ah,
Yeah. Hey, so what is your Christian
Professor
worldview?
Payne reporting. Yeah.
What is your and you would take a whole classes on your Christian worldview, and and the truth is that question is like more of a philosophical question. It's I don't know if it has like a specific answer other than, for me, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for um, attributes of God that have uh, that I can see throughout the world, and that does this and what I sing and what I'm a part of, is this going to create more good? Is this
Mm.
going to create more love? Is this going to create more compassion? Is this going to create more justice? And so for those, I'm looking for the attributes of when you're looking into the Bible, or it, as it's described, as God is described there. I'm looking for that evidence in the world. And I think the key is that evidence for me, is it causing me to join alongside it? Is it causing me to be in the flow, in the river, however you want to look at it, or and some people might call it in the spirit. Is the wind propelling you forward to that, to that, um, which is why that filter, I think, is really, really important. Is that, when you have thought about, who God is, and what, because I think what God does flows out of who God is. And so I'm looking for action. That's really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for what is the active part. And then also too, I think I'm also looking for the flip side too. Like, where is this void? Where is God? Where is that God does not exist, and where does God need to be?
Yeah.
And I think that that is a natural, compelling when you see something. I think really, really, when you see an injustice, or you see people suffering, you see maybe even somebody local, standing on the side of the road asking for money. There is something that's in your heart that goes out to them, and you go, how can I help? That there's a systemic problem that's causing this person to be on the side of the road. And I think that right there, that's the void that we're called to step into, because that's what would bring justice and compassion to that situation. And so for me, I guess that probably a long way around really
Yeah.
comes back to my main point to begin with, is that I'm looking for movement. I'm looking for that
Mm-hmm.
great movement.
Yeah.
And it is what's compelling me to do that.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love that you added a practical example there, and I think for everybody listening, again, we shared our reflections, our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
but we want to really challenge you to think about this exercise in your own terms, and
Mm-hmm.
take that time to reflect, no matter where you are on the journey. And it's not that we have a destination we're trying to get through, but we always have questions, and things sometimes seem really clear, and sometimes things seem really dark. So
Yeah, sure.
but that's what we're hoping to do with this podcast, is to just
Yeah.
start these conversations, and to be a guide on this journey. So thanks for sharing your story today, Robert.
Yeah, you got it. And I think I think I have the big thing I think I want everyone to be left with is maybe a question that I have for you, and
Yeah.
is that for our listeners. So we're asking them to explore their faith on their own terms. So what would be like a practical question that maybe if they could get started? How would they take that first step on discovering who God is?
Yeah. So I think it can be, and we all process things differently. Just take some time to reflect. Just sit there with pen and paper. If you're an artist, if you like to draw, get out those markers, or those colored pencils, or paintbrushes, or whatever it is. If you're a poet, write some poetry. If you just sit outside and be alone with your thoughts, and just reflect on and try to process, what is my image of God? What does that look like? And I think through that exercise, that'll tell you maybe you'll be able to put into words or into pictures something for the first time that you hadn't been able to articulate before.
Yeah. All right. Good place to start. Rob, thanks so much for the conversation today. And as always, you can find us on socialthread.org. You can also support the nonprofit there as well. All right, Rob, thanks. Have a good week.
Yeah, you too, buddy.